and welcome to another episode of Community Pulse, a CAN TV production featuring local leaders and organizations focused on improving the health and well-being of Chicago. Community Pulse is presented by the Foxglove Alliance, a public health coalition supported by the Hectone Institute of Medicine in partnership with the Healthcare Council of Chicago, which is managed by Third Horizon Strategies and Hectone's Nurses in the Humanities. My name is Meghan Phillipp, one of the rotating hosts of Community Pulse, here with HC3, the Healthcare Council of Chicago. I am just thrilled here to be here in the studio with someone who has been advocating and leading the charge around housing and healthcare for many decades. Mark Mulroe is the president of A Safe Haven Foundation. Thanks for being here, Mark.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I'm glad to be here.
Of course. I am grateful, as I already mentioned. So let's get a little grounding around A Safe Haven Foundation. So tell us a little bit about A Safe Havens Foundation's mission and operations for our viewers to really acquaint them with some of the initiatives and the impact that you all have here in Chicago.
Okay. Safe Haven Foundation, we're actually very simple. We have a very simple mission. We want to restore the hope and opportunity to individuals in crisis. And we do that through treatment, behavioral health care and substance use, housing, support services, and employment. So it's just really a very basic, compact organization. Just getting right to it.
Average, helping people with some of our most challenging issues. That's wonderful. And so a recent report from the Chicago Coalition for the Homeless highlighted an increased number of individuals without stable housing in Chicago, estimating 68,440 people will experience homelessness. So just for everyone's benefit, the ABC News equated that to the population of the city of Skokie. So just imagine that suburb, and that is what we're looking at. So this staggering number really exemplifies the challenges. And I think beyond what we commonly perceive as individuals living in tents or street, there are various definitions and dimensions to addressing and understanding homelessness. So I would love for you to walk us through some of Safe Haven's programming and criteria, because like you mentioned, it's not a small thing that you guys are doing outside of housing. There are other very strategic supports. And I would love to think about the sort of transitions of housing and some of the wraparound pieces that you kind of make you the organization that you are.
No, that's a really good question. I think one of the things that needs to be understood is there's so many definitions of homelessness and housing disparities that's one of the first issues that we often deal with, because quite often the numbers where they may describe one population of homelessness or one population that fits into the category, they might not fit all populations. Like, so many people don't know that if you were in a treatment facility and you were in the treatment facility for more than 90 days, even though you had nowhere to go before then, you're no longer considered homeless. You fall out of the system and then have to come back into the system. You have to get back on the waiting list. If you were in a recovery home, because we provide recovery home services, if you're in more than 90 days, you are no longer considered homeless. So you fall out of the system. So there's incarceration. That's one of the big things. So in even defining homelessness, it becomes a complicated issue as to, if families are doubled up, if they're not safely housed. There's a lot of complexities to this. A Safe Haven kind of takes a look at it from the standpoint that we believe that housing is a right. Everybody should have the right and not have barriers to affordable housing. And when you kind of take a look at that, we say, what kind of housing? So we've provided every step of the housing process. So everywhere from immediate emergency transitional all the way to fully supportive housing for people who can live somewhat independently but still need some touch points for them to maintain that independence.
Yeah.
So A Safe Haven has a shelter housing that we do for a lot of youth, interim housing for individuals who are homeless living on the street to transition them while they're stabilizing and getting services. We have supportive, permanent supportive, all the way up to we have housing which is totally independent housing that after somebody becomes stable and they're starting to care for themselves, we assist them in getting their own housing, their own leases to stay in that. So the complexity of the housing process is complex,
Yeah.
but also the services that should go along with it.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit more about how you identify those support services and when someone identifies to a safe haven or is referred to you, and how you kind of help triage and support them?
Triage is a very good word. The initial part is the evaluation. What caused the episode of homelessness? Was it something that was a mental health issue? Was it a substance use issue? Was it a financial issue? Was it that they were housed with somebody else who was maybe a leaseholder and something happened to them and they were no longer eligible to stay in that type of housing? So the first thing is to assess why that person is homeless, or try to get as much information as you can, which the trust building in that situation is often a challenge in and of itself. But then to see what services they need to address this situation, to help them to get on a stabilization path where they can move towards more of an independent housing. So is that, are they experiencing trauma due to being a victim of a crime? Are they coming from corrections? Are they reentering society, trying to reestablish themselves? Have they been chronically homeless for 10 or more years, which we found with a lot of our veteran populations? You have to assess each step of the process, and then case manage it to where you're getting them the services they need, which is important when they need it. So a lot of places that, if you have a menu of services, if you will, is the person ready to accept those services? We were talking outside, sometimes the idea is, well, just put somebody in housing real quick and then they're housed. Well, are they going to be able to maintain that housing?
Yeah.
If they're not stable, or if there's an issue with a substance abuse or a mental health issue, or if they're not employed or they don't have an income to sustain that housing, we've thrown a Band-Aid on a hemorrhaging problem and hoping for an outcome that's not possible. So we try to individually case manage each individual coming through, and we like to call it just-in-time services. Bring them the services when they're ready for it. Make sure that they're supported while they're going through it, so that they can keep moving through the system, so they can keep moving through the process.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to kind of reflect on this, that, you're dealing with people that have probably experienced some sort of negative experience, whether it's domestic abuse or they are going through their own behavioral health or substance abuse. And honestly, the idea of moving and finding a place to live for any of us is stressful. So helping
I just moved
people,
last year and I'll never do it again.
so just to put that into context for everyone, no one likes doing this.
Yeah.
And so the fact that you offer people this continuum is just, I think, so critical. So let's talk a little bit about Safe Haven's strategic considerations as you expand the different locations, because it's about where you exist and how you organize and adapt to meet our unique needs of Chicago and its surrounding areas, and where you position and put people into these houses. So would love to know a little bit more about how you all kind of go about that.
Well, we try to be Safe Haven. We try to always be respectful of the communities that we're going in. Unfortunately, in a lot of situations, the NIMBY, not my backyard, everybody sees the need for it, but maybe not down the street from me. So we always try to be very respectful of communities that we go into. We always try to involve the community that we go into so that they understand what we do, that we're there to support individuals through this process, by providing treatment, case management, mental health, substance abuse service, or whatever they need. Job training, basic adult education, all the disparities that they may need to build to be part of a productive member of that community. And we also encourage our residents to become part of that community, to be part of the fabric that is surrounding them, so that they're viewed as a productive member of the community. So whenever we're going into a new neighborhood, we're very careful, and we're very transparent about it too, about what we do and what we're going to try to accomplish. Each community is different, and then we also take that into account as to the population that we're servicing, to making sure that they fit within the community. You wouldn't want to be. Chicago has rich communities, many neighborhoods, and many different vibes, if you will. So you want to make sure you're respectful of that when you're going in, that you're not trying to change what they're doing, but that you're trying to assimilate and help other people assimilate into that. So we're sometimes we're maybe overly careful about it, but we found a success there. And then we always go with the model that we're there to make it better. So quite often we'll go in, and ours is the facility that we put care into it. We make sure that it's a safe, welcoming place to be. And if you create those type of communities, then you're more welcome than feared. You're more welcome than thought to be, oh, it's that agency. So there's a lot of work to do in it.
Yeah.
And we have a Safe Haven has a great group of professionals. I am surrounded by phenomenal people that just really make me look good all the time. So.
That's good. I mean, I feel like people are what make this work. So as we contemplate the investment in facilities and these wonderful people that work with you, it's all intertwined into really helping the well-being of these individuals and families. So within the continuous push for supportive housing as really an essential health requirement, what are some of the key steps you guys are considering in really sustaining this? Because it doesn't just happen overnight. And additionally, what kind of persistent challenges or threats happen that really make it hard to continue to evolve and grow and really innovate around this model and expand your access?
So I think it kind of starts with our vision and of our model, that we just don't think anybody should have barriers to affordable housing or comprehensive health care. And it's not necessarily just for the individual that's receiving the services, but it's for the community. When you really think about it, if you have a safer, healthier community, it impacts us all. So we always start from that idea that this is a community issue. This is definitely not. It impacts an individual immediately, but it also has the outreach as to how we operate as a city, a community, a state, a country. And starting from that standpoint, that's how we try to build our programs. The challenges we find is we're a very brick and mortar type of organization. We're providing either temporary to permanent housing and everywhere in between, and the services around it. So it's a significant cost and investment, and in there lies our challenge. We are often faced with the funding that doesn't necessarily match the needs of the community, or it's not an investment in the community. One of our key taglines is "Housing is healthcare." Housing is part of the whole health of the community. We struggle with that. A very good friend of mine who he has a wonderful way of looking things, and he has a different perspective. He's done very well, but he came here as a refugee from Europe with his family, and one of the things from that perspective, he looks at it and said, when you really take a look at a budget that's done by a state or a city or a community, it is really a reflection on where they are morally. It is their moral contract with their community. And sometimes we don't always find that to be connected. We struggle with funding. We're not comparable to many other larger cities the same size as Chicago. For instance, in Chicago, we get funded $26 a day to provide all the services we do. That includes housing, case management, food, healthcare, education, job training, etc. We kind of look at that and said that's not really matching to the rhetoric that we're hearing that we should all care for each other.
Yeah.
And it doesn't match as to how a community is reflected as how they treat their most marginalized. so we're always struggling with the funding that's available for these types of services.
Yeah. And I appreciate you kind of drawing that parallel of housing is healthcare, and I think that there is some movement to really connect those dots as healthcare begins to think about insurance paying for housing benefits. But to your point, I think there's an opportunity for more investment from our city and from other sort of broader sources to really support this effort, in addition to the wonderful philanthropic funding that I know fills in the gap. So with that, I feel like it's a great segue for us to think about, we are marching to the polls in a couple of weeks here. So the first question on the ballot this March, we are not sure if it will be valid or not, but I think it's worth discussing the Bring Chicago Home initiative. So this was originally slated for Chicagoans to vote on March 19th. A recent court ruling has cast an uncertainty on it being inconclusive if it will count, because it is printed on the absentee and people are already sort of marching to the polls. So we're going to say, for the sake of our conversation, that the Chicago Board of Elections has won the appeal and challenging the judge's directive. So let's talk about what this referendum stands for and what it means to voters if they vote yes or no. And I would love for you to kind of share your perspective on what this referendum will do and then how it could impact the amazing work that you all do if people vote yes or if they vote no, and how that kind of plays out.
So, I mean, we take a look at it as from an agency as a providing stability in the types of services that can be made available and a funding source. The idea of having a dedicated funding source for these type of services, either whether it's for housing development or the many services that a safe haven does and provides, would be a godsend. It really would, to have a dedicated fund for these services. So beyond general revenue, beyond whatever, the whim of any administration, but to say this is what these funds are dedicated for. And the way Bring Chicago Home is set up is that they would provide these funds, that would provide services for housing developments, affordable housing, increasing the capacity. I've heard numbers like where we're 264,000 plus units short of having affordable housing here in Chicago. So taking a look at that and just having that type of stability would be phenomenal. The other thing is that a lot of people, when they're taking a look at is, again, overall community. If you have a community with more affordable housing where your workers at all levels can be safely housed or and receive health care, they're more part of the economy. They're more part of what makes Chicago unique and what makes it special, but also they're providing services too. And that builds our economy. So it just keeps building, building, and building. So, the current situation is unfortunate that it's been delayed. I hope whether, if the courts determine that it can be, counted on the ballot, it'd be a wonderful idea. Or whether if it's 6 months from now, we can kind of have this conversation of saying, we need to have we need to have established funds for these types of services to support agencies like a safe haven. The conversation is long overdue. It's been so many years in the being pushed down the road. It's just good to at least have it with a vehicle identified. And maybe what would be interesting is even if the courts, I would love this, but it'll never happen. I would love if the courts say, well, you can't count it, but what was the result anyway? How did everybody feel about it? It's just like,
I hope that regardless, like I said, this is going to be on the ballot. We're not sure, as of recording it today, what will happen. But as you march to the polls, if you vote yes, then you're voting for people that are the real estate tax above $1 million on a property would be taxed, and this would go to exactly what Mark just described. And if you vote no, then people over $1 million in spending on a property wouldn't get, this would just not be the source for that funding. But I think it brings forth a great argument to your point is whether it's this solution or not, we still need to find some way to
Yes.
support more opportunities here in our housing and affordable housing. Because you said, how many housing are we short?
We've heard all different numbers, but I mean,
But-
264,000 in Chicago.
I
it's
mean,
like it's
even anything in the
astronomical.
thousands
Yeah.
just kind of
Yeah.
feels very like astronomical. And so it kind of begs the question of just like, how are we going to get there? So this is one possible solution. And so I just encourage you to go to the polls and make it known. And it may or may not happen. And then maybe we'll just know what the results are of how
Yeah.
people feel.
Well, but it's even interesting for, I've heard it on both sides,
Sure.
support and opposition. But even for those who are in opposition, for developers saying, well, it's going to increase our costs. And if it increases our costs, we're passing it on to other people. And like you're passing it on to other people in housing. You're providing them housing and you are passing it by because it may cost them a little bit more for the unit that they're buying. But what does it say to, again, back to the moral contract that any community has with its
Yeah.
citizenry? If it improves, if it provides that we can get more health care to people who are chronically homeless, if we can get substance abuse services to those who are suffering from opioid addiction and maybe housing, homeless because of that, if we could get more people job training so that they become part of the employment market, it's really an investment in your community. So we have to decide how we're going to pay for it. And is this a viable way of doing it? We are developers. Safe Haven does develop properties. We developed 2 housing units, a 90 unit for veterans, just down the street from our main campus, and another 75 unit right across the border in Hobart, Indiana. But what's important to us is that was an investment in our community, and that's an investment for services and for places for people to live. If it costs a little bit more, wouldn't it be worth it? If you knew you had a stable population and you were working more to the stability of that population. So I think we're pitting two sides against each other where there might be a way to come together to make sure that, is this an investment that will improve our overall community? Will it improve our city, which I think it will. So I wish calmer heads would prevail and we would have a little common sense and logic and sit down and figure out how to work out this together rather than fighting it out in the courts.
Yeah, I mean, you've been doing this for many, many years. So
Many years, yes. You said decades. I was like, well, it's only 2.5 decades.
I mean, it's more than one decade.
It's more than one
I think
decade,
that,
yeah.
what continues to get you up in the morning to really this be your charge? And like, what is your aspiration, if something like an initiative like Bring Chicago Home and more could come to this space, what would be kind of your ideal goal?
Oh, my nirvana is that a safe haven would no longer be necessary. Wouldn't that be nice if we lived in a community where people received health care without having to have it as considered a charitable care? If people could be affordably housed or supported in a system. If you wanted my big picture, the pie in the sky is that we put ourselves out of business, that we would live in a community where this would not be necessary. Absent that, what gets me up every morning and on the worst of days has me looking forward to coming back to work every day is every time I go in there into a safe haven or I meet people and you see the hope in their the hope that you start to see the sparkle come back to their eye. You start to see them experiencing something different, and you start seeing them achieving. Or they come back to you like 6 months later and say, "Remember, I was here," and of course you always say, "Yes, I do," and they show you apartment keys, or they show you a pay stub, or say, "I've been employed and I just had my 6-month anniversary at my employer." There's nothing that buys. I mean, you can't pay for that. I mean, it's such a feeling. And then the people I work with. I mean, again, I say, a safe haven is a a brick and mortar type of agency. The real phenomenal part of it is the people who work there. They come every day. They are there to help other people. They put other people first, and they're there to help them achieve, and they celebrate with them. And it's kind of a cool feeling.
It is.
It really is. That's what keeps me coming every day. So.
Well, I am grateful that you keep showing up every day. We are out of time, and I just want to say that people should support the Safe Haven Foundation, find them on social media and their website. They're doing tremendous work that gives back to our communities through housing and healthcare. I want to thank CAN TV's Nonprofit Services for supporting our program today. My name is Meghan Phillipp. I'm with HC3. This has been Community Pulse, which airs on CAN TV 21. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. It was
Great to have you.
Thank you. I enjoyed it very much.